In December of 2020, Big Heavy World hosted Art Mosh, a 2-day virtual summit of presenters who gathered to help Vermont's creative community survive and recover from the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, discussing how they've been affected both financially and creatively. They also share their plans for post-COVID life as an inspiration to others. In this second episode of this 6-part series, we hear from DJ LLU. DJ LLU talks to us about the pivot from in-person DJ gigs to online DJ gigs based on COVID-19. We at Big Heavy World, as citizens of the United States and the state of Vermont, would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the occupied, unceded, and seized territory of the Abenaki people. And now please welcome DJ LLU.
Well, thanks everybody, and thanks to Craig for inviting me in on this, Big Heavy World, and all of the other great performers and venue wranglers and bookers who are taking part in today and also tomorrow. It's a strange time to be in all of those, wearing any of those hats, basically, both kind of in filling our own hearts with why we do this kind of work, but also in filling the hearts of others who come to experience those happenings. And those happenings are few and far between and have had to get real creative in the last almost year. It's wild. Like, I'm like, oh, March is just around the corner and it'll have been a year of living in this different world right now. So Craig and I talked a little bit about, kind of what we wanted to talk about around DJing in COVID, not in COVID, but during COVID, and dance parties, and how we've kind of cobbled it together. It's a welcome to Zoom world, right? It's examples like that where there has been people kind of like learning by trial and error, trying to figure out how to hold any kind of event, but especially DJs trying to figure out how do we still put music out there in a way that can engage people, because there's just a unique experience, I think, about being a DJ and being in a room with people, whether it's a small room, a big room, if it's like the Monkey House or Higher Ground. Dance parties are an experience that is held together in a very unique in-person kind of way. So converting that to be online has been a wild experience in a lot of ways. I've certainly experienced some pros and cons to it. It's funny, like Craig was saying, it took a pandemic for us to book gigs together, let alone do get more gigs on the same day. But it also took a pandemic for me as a DJ that I just do this stuff on the side. I have like a day job like many other DJs. But it's taken a pandemic for me to have more DJ gigs than I've ever had, honestly, in recent memory, like at least since back when Pearls was open. So I wanted to share with you guys kind of 3 things today. The kind of why would you want to keep DJing during a pandemic? Like, if it's so complicated, if it's so hard, if like the real experience is only in person. I want to share with you a little bit about the how I've kind of trial and errored my way through it. Certainly had some major fails when I started and more successes the more I've done it. And then also I think it's important to talk about the third piece of this when I was thinking about it is the what, because DJing by yourself is a completely different experience, at least in my experience, than DJing in a crowd. And I think maybe like that's where I wanted to kind of start. And, Craig, feel free to jump into like, as it makes sense to you. But my experience, and I should start by saying that my experience as a DJ was in radio. So ironically, it's kind of, I was pre-set up for the pandemic, because when you are a radio DJ, you're literally going into a room by yourself and talking to yourself, playing music by yourself, and you're kind of imagining that people are actually listening. Now, most of the time, there are actually people listening. There are quite a few people listening, actually, depending on what kind of radio station you're on. I've been on community radio, and I've also been on the Buzz, which is a much broader reach. Like we had people listening. The Buzz covers like Montreal, Burlington, Plattsburgh. There's like a much larger population that listens, and especially because it's commercial radio. But what I've loved about being a radio DJ is that there's an intimate experience in that process. So you're literally, I think about talking to one person, not to thousands of people, but to one person when I get on the microphone. And when I'm crafting a set, it's this like intimate one-on-one, I'm doing this for at least one person kind of experience. And sometimes I think, oh, it's probably just me, but there's usually at least one or two or hundreds of other people listening, no matter what platform. And when I've experienced DJing during the pandemic, it's kind of that same feeling for me. I'm like, I'm probably doing this for probably one or two people, but there's an intimate one-on-one experience that kind of resonates with me about that experience. And it's different than when I was doing DJing in front of a crowd. So Craig and I met, God, I don't know how long ago, Craig, like a couple decades ago now, when we were both
at least,
yeah, when we were both a little younger. But we met at 135 Pearl, which was Vermont's only queer bar in Burlington here. And Craig and I had, like Craig was a DJ. I was like coming to just like dance, hang out with my friends. And at some point we like, I revealed that like, hey, I would like to try to DJ more. I had dabbled a little bit in college doing dirty basement parties, but nothing beyond that. And so Craig kind of gave me my start here in Burlington, which I'm forever always going to be appreciative of. That's kind of my DJ origin story. As the DJ on July 4th had canceled or something, and Craig was like, hey, you want to go DJ the like main floor at Pearls? And I was like, oh my God, this is my moment. I think I was like 22 or 23 years old. And so, I lugged all my stuff down there and I had this great experience. And after that, honestly, every dance party I've experienced after that, both being a DJ or trading off DJ sets or being on the dance floor, there's been this collective experience. You are there with a bunch of people kind of vibing with the tunes, really creating this musical experience that you can see immediately how people are reacting to it. The wallflowers, the like sweaty people that are commanding the dance floor, the people who are, finding love on the dance floor, people who are just like letting loose on the dance floor, whatever it is. There's this like collective, like we're here together for this moment experience. And in the pandemic, we've all lost that. I mean, like that's true, I think also for like concerts or like, plays or even comedians, like you're in the crowd kind of experience. And so when I've DJ'd online, that kind of what you're doing has really shifted for me because, you'd be able to bop around and you'd be kind of, at Pearls at least, you were protected in a DJ booth, which frankly, I kind of miss. I miss being able to be in a protected little space with a little window that you look out of. Because now you DJ and you're always standing on a stage. So you kind of have to be the performer too, dancing the whole time and not like really trying hard not to have your concentration face on where you're like beat matching in one ear. And like, I mean, Craig's way better at it than I am. I always like, to my horror, realize that I have straight up concentration face on most of the time. But my point there is that, the DJing on a stage is kind of the same experience now that you're DJing on a screen, right? So like people are just not just listening, they're also watching what you're doing. And so much like any Zoom, much like any other experience, like I've tried to also think about what's that experience like? What are the visuals people are experiencing? What can I cobble together in my home here to make it more interesting to not just listen to, which like is what DJing for me at least is about, is like it's that musical journey and soundtrack that I'm creating for that vibe. But there's also a visual component to it because a lot of people, again, are jumping in and out of these dance parties. They're not staying for the whole time. So what's that hook and what are they kind of doing and seeing? And to be totally frank, like I see big DJs like DJ Nice, who's like kind of like held it down in Instagram as kind of like, I think he even was like one of the Time Members of the Year or Time People of the Year for basically just like DJing in his like, I think it was his kitchen for like most of the year. Then he shifted it so we could like look out at LA over his shoulder out of his windows. But like, it's just him bopping, at his kind of setup there and getting on the mic and hyping a little bit. Other DJs I've seen like set up these like incredible visual things, like Kid Koala up in Montreal does this weekly kind of really mellow down tempo 2-hour set where he's got this like visual thing going on. So you actually don't even see him. He's DJing and it's like, you just see these like, he's told me it's security cameras that he has set up in his little studio that are like doing these like kind of wintry visual kind of sciencey thing. It's weird. It's cool and weird. And like, again, talk about production level that like, he's obviously a professional DJ. That's kind of what he does. But anyway, and then there's a whole range of stuff in between. So I just wanted to kind of at least hit there a little bit about the what, like how it's been different, how it's changed for me at least, how it echoes this like radio experience of that I already kind of had and I've been able to kind of anchor on, but and it's like it's constantly changing in those ways about like that what, depending on what the event actually is. Like, is it just me DJing? Am I trying to like DJ with someone else? Like Craig and I did that for the first time on Halloween, and I felt like, wow, that felt totally different to me in a great kind of way, because before, doing it by yourself, it's like, I just here by myself. I could see that there's like maybe 20, 30 people dropping in to do something, but that energy level that usually a live crowd kind of creates and keeps you going. I had missed that until, honestly, Craig, you and I had finally done a tag team. And at Pride back in September, I'd also experienced that a little bit by having some dancers jump in. Like literally just people said, I want to come and dance for one song. And I'd share the screen and it'd be me over here DJing and the person dancing. And I was like, okay, this feels cool because I'm interacting with people, right? It's not just me spinning. So anyway, that's kind of the first thing I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah. If I can jump in for a second, the one thing
absolutely.
that was really cool that we did during StreamYard was that somehow it was synced up in a way that we could beat match in and out of each other's sets. It was almost like we were in the same room playing for the same crowd. It was very, very cool. I don't know how that worked and if it'll ever work again, but that night it was on point.
Yeah. Well, so that's a great point, Craig. I think the technology piece is really important. Like a seamless experience technology wise is a game changer because in DJing, it's both your experience as a performer. Like the tech stuff has to work. It has to sound good. Like in my opinion, if it's like if it's crummy sound.
it's fine. It's all good.
Okay.
We're all adults here.
Okay, good. But if you're all like, hey, we're recording this for the future. Like, so.
Well, everyone has cable.
Yeah. Okay, good. But if it's crummy sound and people are tuning in mostly to like listen and hear, then what's the point? If it's breaking in and out, you and I have talked about this a lot, Craig, like, when you're streaming on social media, it drops out for copyright stuff. Is that a fun listening experience or dancing experience? Nah, not really. So like locking down your tech, I think is a really key piece to like busting into this like COVID online performance space. But I think the other side of the tech is also like, what's that user's experience, right? Are they able to interact with you? Is there an interface that like looks cool, is cool? Does it allow people to kind of drop in requests and stuff? I was hearing in the previous panel, like, you hyping, like, you're trying to get the requests in that engagement piece. And I think it's actually great that it's almost more accessible than a normal dance party experience, because frankly, my experience with most people requesting or trying to engage with me during a live in-person dance party is like, it's people who've had a little bit too much to drink. It's people who like, climb onto stage. It's people who kind of don't leave you alone. They show up with the phone and they're like, do you have this song? Can you play this song? And I'm like, oh my God, like press the DJ. Yeah, you get it, Craig.
100%.
So, but in this format, like people can enter in comments. They can say like, hey, I love this. Like, thanks so much for doing this, whatever it is. And you don't always get that in the crowd. Like, I mean, you get people who are doing the pointing and like, like they're vibing with you on the eye thing, but like, I think there's an opportunity for more intimate engagement again with these online platforms. And so, Craig, I did pull together a couple slides to show people platforms if we want to jump into that. And as people have questions, like, please like drop them in the chat and I'm happy to answer questions. And, Craig told me to spend about 20-25 minutes just kind of doing a little brain dump about my approach to stuff. And that's kind of where I'm at. So let me screen share here. And, the thing that is interesting, I think, about this online world of any kind of performance. Again, I'm speaking specifically to DJ stuff, although I have done a couple of other events within these platforms that are like hosting an event. So like I was acting kind of as like the technical director, helping Outright Vermont do their fire truck pull award ceremony. So there were like a bunch of people engaging, like pulling them in and out. And I found some of these platforms to actually be helpful for that too. So if there's anybody watching who isn't necessarily a DJ or wants to experience experience a DJ set, like know that some of these platforms actually work pretty well for like other types of events. Because certainly this whole year we've all experienced like, there's no award shows, there's no celebrations, there's no kind of even speaker series or things really able to happen in a way that feels something other than just another Zoom meeting, like there's kind of that feeling of it. So I put that as a proviso. Anybody watching, you can kind of, I think, experience that in a different way, depending on what platform it is. So I'm going to start with kind of like where I started in my flow of the year, the last like, how many months has it been? 7 months, 8 months? I don't know what year is it? What month is it? So back in March, my first instinct was, this is really heavy. This is really anxiety producing. Where are my anchors as an individual about like, how do I deal with my anxiety and stress? And it's often, it usually is with music, and it's usually with doing my weekly radio show at WRUV here in Burlington, but it's also been doing dance parties. And so I was like, how can I pull that off from the safety and the stay in place order of my own home? And so much to the like chagrin of my partner, I pulled out every box I've carried around my life of all the old audio gear, old cords, all these things that I've kept. And I'm like, I'll totally need this one day. And like this pandemic was the day that I needed all of those cords and gear. And I pulled it together and I cobbled together essentially a from home broadcast studio to do radio shows. But I also realized I could totally just use this to stream and do a DJ set. I just plugged in my DJ rig into the mixer setup I had. And I was like, let's do this. So me, like many other DJs back in like mid-March, late March, were like, well, what's the easiest way to do this? Let's just go live to Facebook or live to Instagram. And so I immediately realized, like a lot of people did, that there's pros and cons to it. And that's kind of how I experienced every platform I'm going to show you guys all quickly. So my first experience with Facebook was like, it's great because it's got that interface where people can comment and watch. It drops into people's feeds saying like, hey, DJ LLU's live right now. So there wasn't much hustle I had to do to kind of like really hype it hard on promo. I just kind of like popped up on a Saturday and like people popped in because everyone was home on, already on their screens. And so that's what I really liked, is that they had all those pros about it. It also automatically recorded it, and it was like it replayed easily for anybody who wanted to. And most importantly, even though technically social media is not free because they're stealing all of our data, shout out, Facebook and all those other creepies out there, but it is free. Like we don't have to pay into that as an annual fee or a monthly fee. The cons about it are that it has these massive copyright right dropouts. Like they're not paying the subscription fees or the licensing fees that a radio station usually does, or some of these other online platforms do. So you end up with Facebook just like dropping the sound out, and Instagram dropping the sound out, either live during the set or afterward when you go back to watch replay. And unless you're deeply seated in who owns what licensing for which label, you have no idea how to build a set around that. Like generally, as the more months went on, the more I did this, I realized, okay, I can't play anybody on Columbia. I can't play anybody on RCA. Like I kind of started to anticipate which artists were doing that, but I was like, that's no fun. Like, I don't want to build a set around like whose licensing fees are getting paid into Facebook and who aren't. So that's just one thing to know, is that like, while it's a super simple platform, the audio just like generally sucks in general, but also it drops out your copyrights. Instagram is especially bad because it only lets you use your onboard smartphone microphone. I haven't found a way to plug in a direct line into here to give it a better audio feed. So it always ends up being like kind of like this janky side, camera, like second camera view when I try to use it. So for me, my opinion is not great for dance parties. Way better for Q&A, interviews, workshops, PowerPoints, anything with a spoken word where it's your own individual content, not someone else's pre-recorded stuff. Zoom, which we are in right now, obviously for this presentation, equally had some interesting like pros and cons, to be honest. That was the first platform I used to do an actual dance party. I actually went live to Zoom, and then from Zoom pushed it to Facebook and actually also YouTube. There were some pros to that, like, the free side of it was, you can have up to 25 people on the screen at one time. I wanted to create like a, people dancing on screen with me kind of thing, dance party kind of vibe, which, I had invited out to my friends, I invited out to my networks and everything. This was like right before people realized what Zoom bombing was. And in my first dance party using a Zoom, I then got to experience what Zoom bombing was. So like these like total sexist, homophobic, racist, really dangerous, trolly people just like jumped into any public Zooms they could find. They still try to do it, but they've pretty much locked it down at Zoom. And they come in and they bombard the screen. They steal the, the speaker spotlight. And then all of a sudden there's like inappropriate photos popping up and like people yelling and like doing all kinds of stuff. And so that was a good lesson learned in that first or second Zoom where we got Zoom bombed. It felt like I had made it online as an online DJ dance party to be finally Zoom bombed, but it was not a good experience for all of us. I had to shut the Zoom down, restart it. Now there's like, you have to admit people. I mean, anybody coming into the Zoom today, the reason you have to be admitted is because Zoom bombing was a thing back in March and April. So, there's also other limits to Zoom as well. There's a 40-minute limit. So if you're only going to do a 40-minute DJ set, you're good. If you're going to do something longer than that, you got to pay into it. There's also a participant limit if you're really getting a lot of people in there. And again, there's copyright. In my opinion, I think there's also some copyright concerns in here. depending on what you do with this afterward. It's one thing to go live. And I think because of the pandemic, there hasn't, the folks who own all those licensing companies haven't figured out like, oh, is Zoom kind of like YouTube? Should we go after Zoom, like, or the individuals broadcasting to get licensing fees? I think that that's coming. So I would not advise anybody who's looking to kind of invest in doing online DJ performances to really do the Zoom thing, because you're kind of opening yourself up for a potential licensing issue there when and if these companies get around to it. Now, fingers crossed, obviously, we're not living in this COVID moment for another year, but, you know, how long will it take before people are allowed to pack back to dance floors? Like, I think that dance parties are around for a while online, at least for now. So I warn people about the licensing thing, because it is a really big deal, and you can't just kind of like shrug that off. It's you could get slammed with some legal stuff if you ignore it. So again, Zoom, way better for large meetings, things like what we're doing right now, conferences, presenter style events that you want to have audience interaction, but maybe share a screen, maybe something like that. But again, not necessarily sharing other people's content. I've also seen people like doing kind of like online movie viewing together. And it's really important to be clear that there's, again, that licensing piece and the copyright. You can share stuff. I think it's like the year right now is about anything before 1975. I mean, you'll have to Google this, but there's the public domain that things fall into after about 50 years. So whatever 50 years ago was, actually, whatever that is. Anyway, you should Google it. I'm not an expert in it, but I do know that you can't share other people's content, you know, within copyright laws, unless it's like pretty darn old. So just a heads up about that. Okay, so next one here. So for much of the year, to broadcast just audio, I was using this platform called Mixer.com. So Mixel without an E.com. It was just for audio streaming. It was a super easy interface. I basically just like downloaded the platform onto my laptop. It found the inputs that I wanted to use, so my mic and my input for the audio I was going to play, and then it allowed me to kind of essentially broadcast out. I had like a mini radio station. So I use this for radio shows and for live DJ sets that I just wanted to do audio for. I especially like this because, again, the reason I do this is to have good audio. So like this was better to me than what Zoom and Facebook were doing to the audio levels and sounds. It just was sounding too crappy. The con about it is that that I found technically it was tech-wise dropping out on me randomly. And then it would be like, I'd be 40 minutes into something. I'd be like, this is not broadcasting anymore. What's going on? So there's like no warning symbols. It just kind of kicked out. It is a $10 a month fee for service to use. And it only gives you at that rate, it only gives you 3 hours every 24 hours. So if you wanted to do something longer or broadcast like a radio show one night, for example, like I was doing on a weekend, and then do a dance party the next day, you couldn't do it. You had to wait 24 hours, which was kind of annoying. But again, best for good audio, DJ sets, radio broadcasting, only solo. And again, it's like a sending the signal out into the world, not a two-way street. I wanted to give a quick nod to Twitch. I know some people have definitely been using Twitch. This is largely a gaming platform for people who want to like, you know, play with their friends, or more importantly, kind of do like the real badass gamers, the people who are like so good at whatever it is, Fortnite, whatever it is that they're playing, that people actually watch them as if it's like a YouTube channel. So again, Twitch is been used a bit by DJs that I've seen out there. It's very similar to YouTube, if people are kind of familiar with that. So you set up a channel, you brand it. My experience with it has been very limited. I believe that it kind of just pings whenever you go live, but much like YouTube, you need to have subscribers and people to realize that you're on the platform. So just know that that's like, if I were to suggest a video style platform, I would suggest one of the ones I'm about to share later, not necessarily Twitch. Twitch really is mostly for gamers, and it's becoming a little bit more for people who want to do commentary stuff too. Like Congresswoman AOC is connecting with a guy who's a podcaster often to play this game called Among Us, but also talk politics. So it's clearly meant to be like more for interview vocal stuff rather than DJ stuff. So another platform I use is Mixcloud. I think, Craig, you're familiar with Mixcloud here. Now this one is a great platform because it's audio only, so not video, but audio only. They cover all those licensing fees, even for a free account. So it's kind of like you could upload a pre-recorded anything, like DJ set, radio show. This is where I archive all of my radio shows. I've got like hundreds of them up there. and people can go back to listen later. But in the COVID moment, they also really activated their live functions. You can go live here, kind of like what I was doing on mixer.com. And it gives you some additional platforms. You can also monetize, kind of how like in YouTube, if you get a certain number of subscribers and followers, there's a monetizing opportunity there. So if you really kind of stoked this, you could get some money off of this eventually. Again, I'm not saying you go, you're going to become like the influencer with 1 million, Instagram followers or YouTube followers and get like tons of money off of this, but this is how you build your base. This is one of those platforms. Some of the cons are, if you want more of the functions, like most of these, you have to pay in. So there's a free version, but there's a $15 a month one that allows you to start going live. I find the UX, the user interface, a little clunky, but that's just a thing to know. And then you do need additional streaming software to actually make the live function happen. They walk you through it. There's a whole tech thing to it, but it isn't just as easy as a plug and go or a push a button and go. There's a couple other steps to it. So again, if you're just looking to do radio shows or DJ sets, or again, good audio only, this one might be one of the ones you might want to look into. I found it to be pretty good. I've used it for years, at least on an archiving kind of user kind of platform. So then finally, here's StreamYard. Now, StreamYard honestly is like the one that I like the most. So StreamYard is this platform that does pretty much all of the pros for all those other platforms I was just telling you guys about. So StreamYard is, and I don't know if they existed before COVID, or they must have existed before COVID, but they blew up kind of like Zoom did once COVID happened, because they're an interface that that is integrated with every social media platform. So you can push from StreamYard to Facebook, to YouTube, you can push it to Twitter as well. And what it does is that it's better than Zoom in that you can add nice branding and graphics to it. You can drop in screen sharing. You can have people in a waiting room that you pull in. Like on the user experience, you're almost like a technical director. Like, those control rooms, like backstage of like any live show. Like that's the platform. So like, Craig, when you and I were DJing, I was pulling you out off the screen. I was putting you back on the screen. There was this that's because this platform basically has that interface in it. I couldn't have done that in Zoom. If I pulled you off the screen, I would have kicked you out of the Zoom room, or same thing, Facebook doesn't allow you to bring anybody else into the room. So StreamYard, I think, is like, if you're going to do this and you want to have that video experience, the good audio experience, an interface that isn't too complicated, that you can still both DJ and also kind of tech direct on the fly, I think this is the one to do it. Plus, it gives you all of your comments and your live streaming and your stats all in one spot to see. So anybody commenting on any platform, you're seeing it all through the StreamYard platform. And the thing about it is that, for all of that, yeah, they should totally have it be a fee service. I get that. So it's about $25 a month. For me, it stopped making sense because I had this vision in the fall that I was going to do dance parties every week, and I was going to whatever, it was going to be worth the fee. I ended up doing one since, which was actually with Craig. Actually, I did two. I did Pride and I did Craig, and I haven't done another one since. So for me, it isn't useful to have this platform. But again, if this is something you want to do on the more regular, I totally suggest the platform, because as you can see here in this photo with me and Emoji, Emoji was one of those dancers at the Pride. This is the Pride set that I was doing. So I had my screen going, I had Emoji dancing, I put the pop-up logo on there. There is what's called a crawl. So like if you watch CNN, the crawl that happens at the bottom of the screen, I could put a crawl there that was asking people to pay a cover, like Venmo me $5, just as a way to monetize it a little bit, because there's not really any other way to ask people. You can get on the mic and say, hey, if you like what you're hearing, it'd be great if you could drop a couple bucks, because this is a labor of love. But the Venmo or the scroll, and allow me to have that Venmo set up there, allowed it to just be a subtle ask, right? No pressure. People could hang out if they wanted to, but that night alone, I made $200. People dropping me some Venmo cash, which was great. And I didn't have to get on the mic and be like, hey, I'm unemployed and I'm DJing for free here. Hook a kid up. So anyway, I think StreamYard is by far the one. If you're going to do it with a program like this. And so the last one, I just wanted to show you what Kid Koala uses. He uses one called Crowdcast. Again, this one is if you want to start kind of I think dabble in the social medias so that you kind of get your bearings about you. If you're going to start paying, I would go to StreamYard. if you're like a pro DJ and you're looking for like the better platform than maybe even StreamYard, I think Crowdcast might be what to do. And you can go back and watch these of what Kid Koala is doing to see what that interface looks like. But it's basically like an all-in-one encompassing experience. Like you create your users create their own little account so that they can kind of be there and they can talk with each other in a little side chat room. You don't even have to be involved in it. It's all this fully integrated stuff. Again, it costs money. This one is $30 a month or more if you want to have not have a cap of your time limit. But it's also great, I think, for regular audience building because you can basically, you can put a schedule up. So you can say like, so for example, Kid Koala does this every Monday night, 8 till 10 from Montreal. And he's got enough of a following. I mean, he's like a pretty well-known international DJ. I join in on this every Monday night, and like there are people literally all over the world engaging with him on this. And it's possible because this is the one place they know they can go. Like that, this is the platform. They sign in, they get the link, and it's all interfaced. It's not like, you know, again, social media or some of these other ones where you have to do all this hype or if you're moving your event around. So I really like Crowdcast as a user, as like somebody who's experiencing the performance. So I believe that at least is the end of the platform pieces. And Craig, I did a couple other kind of like, I don't know if people had questions about basic, like what gear are you talking about, Lou? These boxes of stuff that you had at your house. So we could talk a little bit more about that if we want to nerd out a little bit, but those were the platforms, and I'll pause there for questions. Or Craig, your thoughts about any of these platforms you've used?
Well, I love, I mean, listening to you, I've learned a lot there. So I'm processing. The one thing I will say is that sort of interactive thing with your audience. And I'll share two different things that I've experienced. And one of those is when I do my Friday night Zooms with Recovery Vermont, I have, you know, sometimes there's 10 people on the screen, sometimes there's 20. And I get to be that DJ that is in the booth looking through the little box, and I get to engage with who I want to and at my own pace. I can look at the comment section or the chat room when I'm done mixing and then go back to, okay, here you go. Hey, what's up? I can talk. But also finding that one person, whether it's Joshua or someone else on my screen, that it's like, okay, they're doing a dance. I'm going to do that dance because I can't look at everybody. All of a sudden, next thing you know, all 20 people are doing the same dance. And it becomes this thing where, okay, now I want the next dance. And so that becomes part of the interactive experience of folks using these. The other thing that I will say is this, I used to do this thing on Facebook every Sunday morning when they started. I would do a gospel house set. And it was mostly folks who were and are religious folks, and they were missing their church families. And I'm not a very religious person myself, but it felt really good to have folks that would engage. And sometimes there were a couple hundred people in the room. One day I get a text from my aunt after I was done, and my grandmother, before she passed, she needed help to go to the bathroom, but she was watching me and listening to me on my set and was loving it, going, oh my God, Craig found Jesus again. And, but then in the middle of it, she had to get up and go to the bathroom. So my aunt helped her to the bathroom. In the middle of that, Facebook dropped me out because of copyright, and I restarted the stream. That was a frustrating thing because you come back and maybe half the people come back to the room with you. The one thing I will say, though, from that text was that my grandmother goes, where's Craig? Get him back on the screen. So, so people that can't normally go to these types of events get to go and engage in their own time, in their own space. Sort of like, also, one last thing I just thought of, I did something for Camp Tecumseh this summer where the kids couldn't have cancer camp. And then the folks that run Camp Tecumseh, they're like, wait a minute. Even without COVID, there are kids that are too sick to come to camp. We have to keep this going. So there's always going to be this piece. It's a matter of figuring out a way so it's viable for us to do it, whether it be financially or otherwise, and it's not too much of a pain. And I think you've really helped some folks and me know some places to look for, you know, for platforms and equipment, et cetera.
Yeah, you know, Craig, I totally agree. There's a lot of dare I say, good that has come out of this COVID moment, right? You know, as human beings, you know, politically, socially, community-wise, you know, Vermonter-wise. But I think as performers, and I see a question in here from Jim, you know, talking about the that interpersonal experience that was happening with dance parties, and you know, will that come back after COVID, and how will that have changed, basically? And I think that your point there, Craig, is right, that like before COVID, there were a lot of people who couldn't come out to clubs, who couldn't come out to dance parties for a variety of reasons, right? Whether they were in recovery and it was like too risky for them. That was their high risk. Like they couldn't be in a space where other people were drinking, whether it was people who are introverts and they're like, it was their nightmare to be in a room with a bunch of people, and yet they still love to dance. Like, so how were their needs ever being met by that kind of one size fits all experience? There were DJs who were like, look, I work for a living. Like, I can't be out till 2 a.m. every night, so like, and yet clubs really like, push you to only be open, like actual start at 10 o'clock. I mean, that was the older I've gotten and the more that I continue to, have DJ being on the side, like I kept finding, myself having to say no more, right? And that was reducing the accessibility thing. And, like somebody who's trying to throw these events, like either if you're the independent, producer of an event, or if you're partnering with a club, it's like, getting somebody out in the middle of January to come out to a dance party, that's really hard. I mean, like winter experience is hard as a performer. I mean, whether you're a DJ or otherwise. So my hope is that for all of those boxes to be checked, continuing as we come out of COVID, how do events become more accessible for people through the power of screens, and not in a way that like limits, but in a way that brings in more, I think, people to that experience in a way that, still honors the artist and making sure that they get fed and paid and, in those ways, but also that there's a experience for people to participate in a way that is meets their risk level, right? Because I think, on a health level, I mean, not that I'm not a doctor, but like, in my own family experience here, like we've got folks with pre-existing conditions. And so like, we've had to be super safe and like shut down here. So even as vaccines roll out and things like that, I think us, like many other people, are still going to be like waves of people being able to come back comfortably, right? There'll be a first surge of people who are vaccinated and who have less health risk issues in their families or themselves. And so they'll be out there first, right? They'll be like, to keep using a dance floor metaphor, they'll be the first ones on that dance floor. But there's some more of us that are still going to have to be on the edges, right? And so how do we participate and get back into it, in different ways, in creative ways through technology that keeps us right in there? And what does that look like? I mean, I could imagine it being like, I'll pick on the Showcase Lounge at Higher Ground, right? So like, a space that could be set up with cameras, like permanent cameras that help an interface that's like, it's part of how venues basically even expand how they're doing it. I mean, knock wood that these wonderful venues all over Vermont and the world are able to come back, at least in part. But I think that to me is, if I were an owner of a venue, I would be thinking that way, right? Because, you're going to get some people back in a first wave, but more people are still going to want to engage. And so it'll be great because you'll have better sound, better lighting. It'll be that kind of theater experience. There'll be a crowd there, but they'll still be wanting people to participate virtually in that way. So help those venues get back open by thinking about technology and how would that interface happen, so that individual DJs aren't having to be also the tech directors and the, the chord managers and the setting this all stuff up from home. So, yeah.
Yeah. So with that same ideology of the club setting up cameras and being interactive with a crowd at home, so to speak, when my band did the drive-in for Higher Ground this summer, we were asking, people were asking if it's going to be streamed, which I still have not gotten the video from. I was supposed to get the hard copy of what showed on the screens at the actual show, and they said, well, if it completely sells out, then we'll put it online, but we can't advertise it that way. I don't know if you can answer this question, but wouldn't it be great if there was a way to say, okay, this show is happening in Vermont, so everyone else in the world can watch it, but if you live in Vermont, you got to buy a ticket. Otherwise, you can watch it later, maybe, or something like that. Is that something you think that would work?
I think it's already working. I mean, like, I get the New York Times every Sunday, and they've dedicated a whole page to their arts and culture section, which otherwise is kind of like the sports section. There's like nothing happening, right? It's like it went from having like sports and arts and culture sections of like multiple pages to, I remember this. It was like the second or third week of April, and all of a sudden those pages disappeared from the Sunday New York Times. I was like, oh my God, you're right. There's no cultural happenings. There's nothing to write about, right? Everything has grind to a halt. So what I've seen happen with some of these big venues and like big production companies and theater companies and like, I'm talking like Carnegie Hall. I'm talking like, philharmonics around the world, like, a range of not just dance parties, but like big scale people. They have figured out ways to monetize for people to get the like direct link access to then be able to like jump in and experience it, no matter where you are in the world. Now, of course, time zones have an issue. Like, of course, there was, so again, I'll pick on my buddy Kid Koala. He's been partnering with like performance organizations around the world to do different creative things with music. So he did this robot dance party for the United Arab, I think it was somewhere in the Middle East. I forget which country, but anyway, they had a performance center there that hired Kid Koala to run a robot dance party. So the goal there was like, get kids, make your robot with us for an hour, right? Construct it, listen to some music while he's DJing. And then they're going to have then put your robot on and dance. Let's have a dance party for an hour, right? Which was like totally cool. But it was like, you know, in Middle East time, right? The time zone there. So it was like 7 a.m. here or something ridiculous. And so, but I was like, oh my God, this is such a creative, cool thing. It's like the world has gotten small, right? Like we can participate in this. And there were like 400 people in that Zoom, like experiencing it. Again, it was like, we paid in, and I think it was like something easy, like $10. You know, there's that kind of like that uniqueness experience there, right? Where it's like, it's clearly meeting some mission-based, probably grant funding for that particular arts culture organization. But also it's like this universal language of music, right? Like la la la, like, yeah, I'm going to say it, like, you know, there's no need for a language barrier there, right? And so I think, so to your point, Craig, I think venues would be fools to not be thinking about ways to make it accessible in that way, even if it's a reduced price ticket or something, because at the end of the day, they need to get paid too. I get that. Right. But if you invest in the technology, and frankly, what I saw at the drive, how they were setting the drive-in up, they were already had cameras. Like it would not have been all that hard to do one of two things: live, you know, making it live to people with a unique link, or live to tape, right? Like you can watch back later, and maybe again another reduced ticket price. Because I think what we're experiencing with the restaurant industry, what we're experiencing with small businesses, and also what we're experiencing with the arts, it's not that people don't want to pay for it. It's that people are willing to pay for it. So we got to remember as performers to ask, right? To say, hey, I'm not just doing this for free. It's totally fine for me to ask for some money. And also for venues to get in the game in that way too. To say like, hey, we're going to like demystify what this price ticket is about, right? Like, here's what the ticket breaks down. Like 50% of a ticket is like keeping the lights on at these places, you know, 10% of that goes to opening acts, like 20% of it goes to the main stage. I mean, like people I think would be shocked to realize that, like, you know, when they think, oh man, this like $20 ticket to go see Grace Potter is like, you know, exorbitant. Like the price point is not big for venues to stay alive. So like, I hope my pals, Alex and others who own these venues are, you know, are thinking big like that. Because I think people sometimes are like, well, I'm not going to pay $35 just to watch something on my screen, not thinking or knowing what that ticket breakdown actually entails. You know what I mean? So again, I hope in this COVID moment, these are some of the things we're learning, and some of the ways that people are willing to reject some of the old ways of doing things just because of the way we've done them always, you know, and that we bring more people in, not limit people because of their health limits, their comfort ability, or price tag.
Right. Well, and I think it behooves the venue as well to make sure that those cameras are good quality cameras. The feed is good. I mean, it only reflects upon you and your business. And so you want to make your venue look like the best venue in the world. So if I'm on the board of the Flynn doing some programming stuff, and we talk about unfuddy-duddying the Flynn. Yeah. But also realizing this is the Flynn. You are the Flynn. You're not just some Fleabag theater down the street. You're the freaking Flynn. So make it look like that. And at all points, from the time you walk in the door or to the time you log on to something online, it should look that way. So if DJ Lou or DJ Craig, we set up our own cameras, it's not going to look the same as if they have something high quality. And
absolutely.
Maybe that is something that our state representatives and the people who are in power who will be seeing this later on can think about, and whether that's through grants or otherwise, making sure that this driver of our economy, at least a large part of it being the entertainment industry, is taken care of so it doesn't totally crash down and burn the next time this comes around. So there won't be necessarily needs for stimulus checks. We can do things online and have it be where people feel okay about paying a $10 cover to see it because it looks good and it sounds good.
Absolutely. I think, you know, that experience, and that's true even if we were in person, right? Like I've been to many shows where the sound has been crappy and I'm like, I'm not going to stick around for this. Like, what's going on? Is there some like 12-year-old running the soundboard? Like, you know, or more importantly, as a performer too, like I'm not going to sign up to participate in something if I know I'm bringing my reputation to the table, right? So like I need to trust that I'm not going to have tech issues, or it's not going to look bad, or or sound bad. And that was true before COVID, right? If I walked up on the stage and I was getting crappy sound, or, you know, the sound person disappears. I mean, not that this has ever happened to me like multiple times, or, you know, the lighting's, you know, whatever it is, you know, the production value is critical no matter what the format is, screen or in person. And I think you're right, Craig, like, you know, venues investing in that, and the state remembering that, you know, much as it's similar to brick and mortar, right? Like we need to have these physical places for people to be. I think that technology is equally important, you know, like making sure that that infrastructure is there so that this can also be another tool for those venues to be able to get these this content out there. Because we're seeing, you know, I see Cat Wright and other, you know, Vermont performers figuring out ways to do like online performances and like these distanced, you know, inside, like they're performing in barns, right? So it's mic'd up, they're all distanced, and those performances are happening. And, you know, you don't need the audience physically there with you, but like you do need all those mics. You need the space that's able to be distanced. It needs to be slightly warm enough, especially if you're in a barn, to be able to, you know, to pull that off. But, you know, those are the things I think that on the infrastructure side of things, not only need to be funded, but also, I mean, maybe this is a thing that the Vermont Creative Network or some of these other, you know, great entities of strong minds coming together can think about, of like, the state often needs I think a proposal put to them about like, what would it take? What does that look like? You know, is there some safe way that there can also be crowd sharing in that kind of way, right? Like, is there you know, at least for this COVID moment, you know, could venues team up instead of compete? Could they team up in some sort of way, the bigger ones, to, you know, have that pre-set up so that maybe other venues could rent another venue to go, like, you know, have what Monkey House present at the, I mean, here, let's get wild. Monkey House presents at the Flynn, you know, DJ LLU and DJ Craig, like on the main stage. And it's like, you and I are both, I wish the Flynn had balconies, because my vision is more like, maybe we're at the Paramount. We're at the Paramount in Rutland. You're in a balcony, we're DJing. It's already been set up, you know, and it's presented by maybe like another venue that has rented out that space, where the Paramount does it. And they do this already, right? Like the Flynn, I know, rents to I
know Higher Ground uses it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's thinking about, these are practices that exist already, but how can we do this for venues? Because not everybody's going to be able to afford setting up the cameras, setting up the feed, having that infrastructure there. But some of these organizations could, you know, the bigger ones totally could do this. Right. And then is there a way, an opportunity in a spirit of like, you know, community goodwill here, to let some of these other smaller venues be able to rent with maybe state funding, state subsidies, rent in so they can present as well. Because what I love about the small venues is that they're taking much bigger risks than the Flynn or Higher Ground. You know, Monkey House is bringing in these, you know, independent performers that, like, you're like, oh my God, I saw them when, right? Like there's so many small performance spaces in Vermont that are like that, that are going to get crushed during this because they're not able to provide that and have that infrastructure support to pull it all off. Because it's the one person show, right? Or 2-person show at the Monkey House. Like they can't do all those things. So those are just some kind of like on the fly thoughts. I agree, Craig. Like, I think it's, we have everything to gain and nothing to lose when we come together in this like really critical moment together as an entire industry, as performers, as venue owners, and as audience members. Like, you know, I think anybody watching who isn't a performer, isn't a venue owner, but like loves the arts and wants to, and misses experiencing this, like, this is the kind of stuff to practically say to people, like, this is what it would take to keep this going, to keep this nurtured.
I agree 100%. I mean, I think back to, and I know there's a couple questions we'll get to in a second, but I think back to 135 Pearls and our big demise. And it was, and believe it or not, it was a smoking ban. Now, we were a very different business. And so when they announced it and didn't really give us a vote on it, we had no choice, and there was no grace period. I agree. Smoking in bars, it's disgusting. You go home smelling like crap, and not everyone has to. If you're not a smoker, you might as well be smoking if people are smoking next to you. I get that part. The majority of the people that would come in on the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday were usually folks who were pretty much in the closet. They're not going to stand on a main street and smoke their cigarettes. But we had no way of like getting ready for this. And there was no grant to say, okay, we're going to help you build a HEPA filter room or some space outside where people can be protected and their privacy protected as well. And that's, you know, generally why our sales were cut 50% within the first 3 months of the smoking ban. And I went to the city and I said, you know, here's what happened in New York City. And you're basically like, you're killing us here. And I said, well, sales went up exponentially in New York City after the ban. I'm like, yeah, but the study you're looking at is after the first 6 months. In the first 6 months, 100 bars shut down in New York City. Some were open one day and then go there another week and they're gone. Said, so you're looking at the study that says there are fewer bars. And of course, there's more people going there. And those were also some of those bars that sneakily could buy a smoking license because they found a way to worm around it. But, so to be able to look at it from an eye of someone who is either the business owner or the entertainer and consider them instead of just policy.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, because I think a lot of these venues are mission-based, as you're saying, right? Like, Pearls, while it was technically for profit, was mission-based. It was the only gay bar in Vermont, and so that user experience, I think, is unique. And I think there are many places around Vermont that are either because they're nonprofits as a venue, or they're a venue that is specific to a certain type of community. I think that they run even a higher risk of shutting down during COVID because there is such a niche market that they're trying to fulfill that need for. And again, so without help or without municipalities thinking beyond a general approach to a problem, they don't realize that how that usually impacts. I mean, there's other examples of that too, like 242, right? I mean, I know Jim's on the call here. Like 242 it's for young people, right? It was for kind of the people who are the the outcasts, the punks, the that venue experience that is very unique. People who are going to 242 and playing 242, we're not going to the Flynn. I mean, again, no offense, but the venues have different clientele and different needs, and so when you're not able to prioritize the resources that it takes, money, funding, people, etc. Where do those people end up going? You shut it down, right? So it's like it happened to Pearls, it happened to 242. I think COVID is going to amplify this, not just in Vermont, but this is, heck, we could be talking about New York City again. We could be talking around the country. These venues that are were already a labor of love with a very thin margin of keeping the lights on. And when we just say, hey, you've got to, just apply for these big COVID grants, like that's intimidating alone, right? How do you apply for a big COVID grant? How do you navigate that system if you don't already know how to do it? So anyway, as usual, Craig, right here.
And it's also, having those systems in place that it's not so daunting, it's not so scary to avoid resentment.
Yep.
It's people giving the finger to the system because 242 is closed, Pearls is closed. I mean, but maybe there's a way that we can plan for this. When I did the prom for VPR, the one person that had one of the best congratulations and messages to the students was Tom Messner, our local weather guy, who said, you guys who are graduating right now, you folks are going to have it easier than we have it. Because right now we're figuring it out. We're floundering. We got nothing. We're all broken, scared. And the next time that this happens, when it does, you at least have watched us and learn from us. And again, hopefully the folks who are in power are doing the same so that they avoid the fingers being given to them by the folks who were taken to the streets, but also we'll have some power in our own selves to be able to go utilize something that it feel like it's all being taken away from us. It's sad walking by the Monkey House and have it be closed. It's sad, but no online infrastructure to sort of keep it going that people can pay for. So again, like we talked about earlier with having cameras, and if there was a way that places could invest in a really nice technological way of showcasing their space online, so that when they have to shut down, they can still do shows or whatever it is, or even Sneakers is only open Friday and Saturday now. That's sad. They're a 7-day-a-week business, and so. Hopefully the folks that are listening and will listen will be listening and hearing as well.
Yeah. And, to tee it up for my pals who are about to come on after this conversation, I see you guys, Brian, Alley, how you guys, I never see anybody anymore either. It's like, this is my one moment to be like, hey, nice to bump into you. But I think, Craig, it's true for festivals too. Let's not forget that, a huge part of like what people love in Vermont is the outdoor festival experience of either going to see a show on a green somewhere, right? Like the local so-and-so is playing, in the gazebo, let's go sit and chill. Or festivals like Waking Windows or the many, many others around the state. I think there's also ways to lean into that in a state that has so much outdoor space, But again, very little infrastructure of like, it's not like we can all schlep around these like stages and like massive jumbotrons and like what, again, Higher Ground did at the expo. There's a reason they did it at the expo. You don't have to keep moving it around. But, you know, what would happen if if Vermont had invested in or would invest in essentially drive-ins for each main area of Vermont, right? There were like 2 down south, like 1 in central Vermont, whatever, you know, and that was maybe publicly owned. I mean, let's get wild here, right? Like if owned outdoor performance space that could be used during pandemics or otherwise, and rented instead of it having to be this, you know, there's only one place to go and you either got to schlep to Essex or not. I mean, there are fairgrounds everywhere. I mean, these spaces kind of exist already, you know, Rutland and hell, imagine putting Tunbridge on the map, right? Like the Tunbridge festival space, although admittedly that is incredibly muddy. Like you get a sprinkle of rain and
it's over.
Yeah,
Same. And my brain was going towards racetracks, but then I think about that too. That's kind of the same thing.
Again, yeah, like Thunder Road and Barrie. I mean, these we gotta rethink the infrastructures, and what potentially could become more publicly used rather than the niches that they have, right? Like Thunder Road just right now used for racing, right? Like,
right.
I bet Governor Scott could get behind that.
I think he could. I think he, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
There you go. Well, there you go.
So one question I want to get to before I bring on the next presenters. Questlove somehow does Instagram with sound from his board. And how do you think that happens?
You know, so I think he's smarter than me. I think he's prettier than me. I think he's way better at everything than me. He's also the biggest, like, hardest worker in the room. So I think it's a tech thing that I just haven't been able to figure out. I'm sure that there's a technology plugin, and I don't even know if he's using like a Android or smart or an iPhone. So I think there's some kind of it wouldn't be that hard to figure out. I'm sure it's just a matter of Googling it or finding somebody who currently does it to figure out how. That's actually how Craig and I have done most of this, is skill sharing back and forth to be like, hey, like, what sound and video and stuff has worked best for you? Like, let's all make that work. So yeah, I'm sure it's actually not that hard. What I'm saying in my own experience is that, like, managing to get on Instagram, I quickly put that far down my list because it kept dropping out because of the copyright stuff. And also, right. I think there's a time limit on Instagram too that I was experiencing, that it was like, you can only go live for a certain amount of time, especially if there's pre-recorded music going on. And so, like, right. I was just like, forget it. I'm going to move on to something that's more, again, all encompassing. So, right. Questlove, if you're watching, let us know how you do it. I don't know.
Well, the last question I have for you, and it sort of pivots into that, would be, we talked a lot about copyright stuff, which you just mentioned as well again. How do you think folks like Questlove and D-Nice get around all that? Because they never get dropped out anymore. They did in the beginning. I remember the one that D-Nice did with Michelle Obama, who was the co-host, and every 50, even what's his name? Zuckerberg was watching. Yeah. And he gave a shout out to Zuckerberg, and every 15 minutes it got shut down. But now they don't get shut down at all. Is it pay to play?
You know, that little, like, authorized account, like, blue check mark that happens on some of these, platforms. I think if you're Questlove and if you're at that point D-Nice, you don't get shut down anymore because they pay attention to your accounts. I think, the rest of us schmucks out here doing this, like, we open them up for lawsuits. I think that, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in social media. I'm not a, expert in any means, but I think it's no coincidence that, it made them look bad, right? It made Facebook look bad that there was dropouts happening during, time where this guy was happening to getting, I forget what he was at the height, but it was like hundreds of thousands of people were watching D-Nice.
Yeah, there was like 600,000 people on one of them. Yeah.
And so, like, that is bad PR. So if I were Zuckerberg, I would get on the phone with the IT department and say, like, do not go into this guy's account and, like, take it down, or take down all these, like, things. But again, more largely, we are not those people. Let's be honest too. Questlove, D-Nice, they've got teams. They have teams behind them. This is not some kind of, like, I'm just, like, showing up in my kitchen and, like, DJing. Like, their production at this point, there's production and, like, agents and other people that are into that. And frankly, I think especially for D-Nice and at least for Questlove, they actually do, as performers, pay into licensing on kind of a way that, like, for example, a radio station or a venue would. Right. With the ASCAPs and stuff, there are individual performer levels. I don't know the details of that. I've never kind of dabbled in that because everywhere that I usually played before pandemic, like a place like Higher Ground or any radio station, they pay to have that be able to have that music happen in their space, whether it's pre-recorded or otherwise. So So not much of an answer other than you got to get a team. You got to get some people smarter around you.
Right. And get a blue check mark next to your name.
Exactly.